The first time that I read this book, David Mamet's On Directing Film, was back when I was in college. I remember liking it. It didn't change my world or anything. And I've reread it a few times since then, since it's so short, you can read it in basically like an hour. But in general, Mamet has never really been like a god to me or anything. I like a lot of his work and I recognize his place in the canon, but to be honest, he's become a pretty big asshole in the past few decades. So when I recently stumbled upon this when I was flipping through my bookshelf, I was kind of curious if his thoughts on filmmaking would still be at all relevant today. I kind of pictured it like going back and rewatching The Breakfast Club and discovering how much of the movie did not age very well. I'm shocked and almost saddened to report that now that I'm older and more experienced, I think I like this book even more now. To be honest, I was totally ready to make a video roasting this book because in my mind, David Mamet sort of represents this former generation of writers and directors who are these like macho, white male boomers who think that they know everything and have no curiosity about other ways of thinking or new ways of doing things. This is a guy who says that you can't enjoy poetry in The New Yorker if you don't memorize it.
You know, people tell me about the poetry in The New Yorker. So I say, oh, that's great, quote me one line. They can't do it.
Right.
There's nothing there.
They can like it and not remember it.
No,
right?
Absolutely not.
You know, you have to remember poetry if
Hell
you like
yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And this is a grown man who quotes Hemingway in his Masterclass in total earnest.
Hemingway said writing is easy. All you gotta do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed.
This is not even to mention his many very bad political views. He even identifies as controversial on the cover of his own book. But going back and rereading this, I think that a lot of his advice about directing is actually very sound. Revisiting this was kind of like rewatching The Shawshank Redemption. Everybody talks about how good of a movie it is, and it's on every list of best whatever films of the decade. And then you rewatch it for the first time in a while and realize, yeah, it's really good. It's almost annoying to admit it. So let's crack this book open and see what he's got to say. Mamet's big thing, and this isn't something that he invented, is that filmmaking is all about cuts. He says that directing is, quote, a succession of images juxtaposed so that the contrast between these images moves the story forward in the mind of the audience. This, of course, is a riff on Sergei Eisenstein's theory of montage and the Kino fist. Basically, for those that didn't attend the first week of film school, you don't tell a story by showing a shot of a guy sweating and then have him say, "Boy, I'm nervous about this test." You show a shot of a guy sweating and then you cut to a shot of a test in front of him. Through this juxtaposition, the audience will infer that he's nervous about the test. Human minds want to do this naturally. We want to create order out of unrelated things, so the audience will make these associations for you without needing it spelled out. This is all pretty elementary filmmaking stuff, but to be honest, it can be easy to forget about or to take for granted the power and the economy of a simple cut. Of course, the famous example of this is the 2001 Space Odyssey cut of a bone to a spaceship. These two unrelated shots form a story in our minds because we infer that thousands of years have passed and technology has advanced just by placing two shots together. Kubrick didn't need to show a 30-second montage or have a title card that says 50,000 years later or whatever. You just cut. Mamet says that, quote, basically the perfect movie doesn't have any dialogue, so you should always be striving to make a silent movie. While I think that Mamet enjoys being hyperbolic sometimes, I don't think that this principle is a bad thing for filmmakers to aim for. It's better to tell a story with a simple shot or cutting between shots than it is to weigh the movie down with a bunch of unnecessary dialogue. I think that No Country for Old Men is such a good example of this, where there's entire stretches of the film where there's no dialogue at all. Mamet's other really big thing is only focusing on things that are actionable and can be shown on screen. He cites classic film stars who would say to a director, "Okay, what do you want me to do in this shot?" And the director would say, "Walk down the hall quickly." And Mamet says about this, "Listen to those simple adverbs. The choice of actions and adverbs constitutes the craft of directing actors." Which I do actually think is largely true. He tells a story about a scene in Casablanca where Humphrey Bogart signals to the band to play the Marseillaise while there's a bunch of Nazis in the bar. Apparently somebody asked Bogart how they made this powerful scene work, and Bogart said, They called me in one day and the director, Michael Curtiz, said, "Stand over there and when I say action, take a beat and then nod." Curtiz didn't need to bog his direction down by saying, "Weigh the potential consequences of your actions, hesitate, and then charge forward with your convictions." He just said, "Nod," and we, the audience, infer everything else. This reminds me of a time when I was in film school, and I was very self-conscious about saying the right thing to actors. I felt like in a big emotional fight scene, I kind of knew what to say, but I asked my professor, if I'm just getting a long shot of an actor crossing the street, how do I direct them? And the professor told me, tell them to walk across the street. Sometimes you just have to simply do what's on the page and not overthink it. You have to trust that all the emotion and subtext of the plot will be conveyed. Mamet has a really great line that he keeps going back to, which is, the house has to look like a house. The nail doesn't have to look like a house, it just has to look like a nail. An actor doesn't have to embody the entire story of the film in this one beat or this one scene. They just have to do what's on the page and trust that when it all comes together in the edit, the story will add up to a cohesive narrative. Like many things, Mamet takes this idea to the extreme, saying, actors will ask a lot of questions. What am I thinking here? What's my motivation? Where did I just come from? The answer to all these questions is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you can't act on those things. I defy anyone to act where he just came from. If you can't act on it, why think about it? Instead, your best bet is to ask the actor to do his simple physical actions as simply as possible. I can't help but wondering what actors think about working with Mamet, whether they like this approach or not. I think it's one of those things where he's really famous and powerful, so nobody's dying to publicly question the way that he works. And a lot of people would say the work speaks for itself, but I don't think that's always true. I feel like it's kind of a cop-out. A good comparison, I think, is the mythology of David Fincher doing 100 takes of everything. It's like, yeah, his movies are really amazing, but is that because he does 100 takes or because he hires incredible actors and the 100 take thing is just a non sequitur? Maybe he got a really great performance in take 3, but he just kept going for 97 more of them. So would I recommend this book to filmmakers? I would say, yeah. It just kind of underscores the importance of nuts and bolts filmmaking. Thinking about things like, what is this scene about? What does this character want? Is there a way to do this in one shot instead of 5? These are all good ways to approach directing. While none of this is really revolutionary stuff, he says it in a way that's approachable and digestible and usually pretty entertaining. Do I think that Mamet is a filmmaker who should be looked up to and everything that he says should be taken for gospel? Hell no. Would I recommend buying this book used so that you don't give money to a guy who thinks that teachers are pedophiles? Yes. Like everything else in the world, take what works for you and leave what doesn't. And maybe use Mamet as an example of what not to do if you ever achieve fame and success. Instead of becoming a cranky, out-of-touch idiot, try to help raise up other artists and use your platform for good instead of to spew bile. I want to end on a quote from this book that I actually think is really great. The task of any artist is not to learn many, many techniques, but to learn the most simple technique perfectly. In doing so, Stanislavski told us, the difficult will become easy and the easy habitual, so that the habitual may become beautiful. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this about filmmaking, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.